on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Godzilla Kong, the New Empire, whatever it is with that X in the middle. I don't know how you say the title. It's out now. It's another big blockbuster that is out in theaters now, and I can't wait to talk about it more in depth here in this spoiler review. I'm going to talk about some aspects that I didn't really like in that and aspects that I really like. Maybe not so much the monster fights in here because those aren't really like plot devices, Those don't really warrant talking about unless if I think that they're really interesting. And I am going to break this up into topics how I usually do it. Sometimes I don't do it like that because there's not really all that much to talk about, or there's not enough of a structure with the plot to talk about it like that. But I am going to do it with this one. If you are here and you don't want to be spoiled, I have a spoiler-free review. If you are here and you do want to be spoiled, or you have seen the movie and you're here to watch the spoiler review, welcome! So, let's talk about Godzilla Kong, the New Empire in full spoilers. So the first thing I want to talk about is Skar King and this other monster that's in the movie. If you are a massive Godzilla fan, particularly I believe of the Showa era, that's what everybody's been saying, the Godzilla stuff in this movie. If you are a massive Godzilla fan, you will be happy to know that Shimo is in the movie, and she is here to be another companion to Skar King and another monster for Godzilla and Kong to fight. It's interesting. It's an interesting dynamic because Kong goes up against another ape, Godzilla goes up against another kaiju. That's really what it is. It's two monsters that are here. I left that out of my spoiler-free review because I wasn't sure if everybody knew that Shimo was in the movie, but Shimo is in the movie. In the first scene with her is that first scene where Suko leads Kong into the Den of the Apes in Hollow Earth. And we have this really, really great introduction to the Skar King. The Skar King is really, really an intimidating threat. As I said, probably not as good as King Ghidorah in King of the Monsters. I think that that's where the monsters in this universe really peaked. But I do think he's better than Mechagodzilla. And it's just because he's an actual living foe. He's the one who's like the king of Hollow Earth. He's the one who wants to take over the surface world. And he's just got this chain around him. He's using that chain to whip everything. But he's also got a companion, and that is Shimo. And he's controlling her with this crystal thing that he can use to hurt her. It causes Shimo pain, so she essentially just has to bow to his every whim and every cry and every command that he is commanding her to do. He is the one controlling her. He's the one telling Shimo, fight Godzilla, fight Kong. There's this first fight, this introduction scene is probably the best scene in the entire movie. And this is exactly, to me, where the movie really kicks off with the fights and where the energy really sparkles. It's not to say that there wasn't energy before, but when Skar King makes his presence known, his presence is known, man. He is intimidating. He is an imposing force. He is one to be reckoned with because he can just do all this stuff. He also is just the one who's like, Kong, get out of my den, okay? And when Suko looks at him, you can tell that Suko is massively intimidated and scared by the thing. Poor little ape. I like Suko. Suko was actually really cool. I understand why now the movie was potentially going to be called Son of Kong. Makes a lot of sense. I think that this is probably the best fight in the entire movie, as brief as it is. It really, really makes a statement with how intimidating Skar King is gonna be. And the reveal of Shimo, in that moment, I was like, oh shit, it got real. Alright, let's talk about the concept of Hollow Earth, because the Hollow Earth stuff and all that, it felt so shoehorned into the movie. It felt like they just made this up last minute. They needed something to fill a script. They thought, oh hey, we need another 20 to 30 minutes on in this movie. What can we do? Let's just make up some random bullshit lore about Hollow Earth. So when Andrews, Gia, Bernie, and this new guy Trapper, played by Dan Stevens, when they get to Hollow Earth, they come across part of Gia's lost tribe, the Iwi, that were thought to be extinct. Gia is known to be the last of the Iwi tribe, but the Iwi tribe are actually in Hollow Earth. They're the protectors of Hollow Earth. The movie kind of has this adventure feel to it. Temples, puzzles, jungles. It feels like Tomb Raider meets Prince of Persia or something, and that was actually kind of cool. Legends of the Hidden Temple. There you go. So the Iwi tribe needs Gia, and we learn from the Iwi tribe in temple carvings and paintings that Skar King wants to take over the surface world. He once fought Godzilla's species, but Godzilla was the one who succeeded in trapping the Skar King in Hollow Earth. And there's this prophecy that says Gia is gonna be the one. She is the key to reawakening Mothra. Which was interesting. I was like, when they said Mothra, I said, okay, that's an interesting part of this movie because that's another monster. I already, like, they had already done Mothra in King of the Monsters. I really didn't think Mothra was going to come back. And obviously, Mothra was an ally to Godzilla in that movie, but I really did not expect Mothra to come back. I really think with these monsters, it was really going to be just a one and done type of deal. Well, I don't think we'll ever see Ghidorah again, although we technically kind of saw him because you kind of saw his head in Godzilla vs. Kong. This whole thing, I'm like, okay, that's cool. I like that setup. But then there's this thing in Hollow Earth later on. There's a bunch of, they look like crystals. It kind of looks like the Fortress of Solitude from Superman. And apparently there's this thing that relates to a gravitational pull, so later in the movie when the crystals collide there's going to be no gravity in Hollow Earth. That stuff, I was just like, this is silly, this is dumb. This is the part in my spoiler free review where I was saying this is just dumb. And let's talk Gia, because there's even more dumb stuff with her. So, the reason that Gia comes down to Hollow Earth with Andrews, Bernie, and Trapper is the fact that she's been having these hallucinations that end up being this distress signal from the Iwi tribe. This is just dumb. She's having these hallucinations. Like, why couldn't there just be like radiation or something? Like, if there's already research teams in Hollow Earth, if there's already command outposts, why couldn't somebody from that command outpost say, oh, there's too much radiation down here, maybe we should go up to Earth and signal them, and that could be the signal, because they're worried that something's going on. Instead, the plot really relies on Gia, and I really like Gia as a character. I just don't like her used as a plot device. She's by far the best human in all of these movies. And when she's just used as a plot device, as this beacon for propelling the plot forward, since she's the one having these hallucinations and knows that there's a distress signal and convincing everybody to go to Hollow Earth, and then she comes across more of the Iwi tribe. It seems like they hail her as a god, but they need her to reawaken Mothra, and she reawakens Mothra. It really feels like, yeah, she's just there for convenience's sake. It's plot contrivance, plot convenience, plot devising. I wanted more of Gia interacting with Kong. When she interacts with Kong, I really think that relationship between Gia and Kong is really strong. There's a couple of great scenes between her and Kong, and I wish that there was more of them. I wish they just didn't use Gia as a plot device. And they kind of just use the other humans as plot devices as well, because you have Trapper down here with them, who's apparently the veterinarian for all of these monsters. Like, they need vets. Godzilla really just rests. What's the word I'm looking for? It's like a video game term. What's the word I'm looking for? Reset himself, I guess. And like, do they really need veterinarians? I mean, there's this whole thing in the fight with Kong and Skar King and Shimo that takes place in Skar King's den in Hollow Earth. Shimo freezes Kong's arm, so Kong has frostbite. There's this stupid plot convenience thing with Trapper, who's like, hey, at the command outpost, there was some technology that can be used to help Kong, and it turns out that that's that Infinity Gauntlet looking thing, and the way he brings it back, it's so easy. He just goes, grabs it, brings it back. Everybody's still waiting for him. I'm like, did it really take him only 2 minutes to go there? The humans are really awful, and I just don't really like. I just think doing that, using them as plot devices, is weird, because here's the thing too: the Iwi tribe also communicate telepathically. And so that's how Gia comes across the signal. There's so many things like that in this movie, and I was more interested in Gia struggling with being in school, or her interaction with Kong, or Trapper just being the funny one of the group, being the one who's like, yeah, I'll join you guys. And then he's just used as a plot device to go and get the discount Infinity Gauntlet for Kong. And Mothra. Mothra feels shoehorned in as well. Like I said, it was nice to see Mothra again. I really didn't think that she would be in it because, as I stated, I think these monsters are kind of one and done. But I didn't really see the purpose in the whole thing where Kong needs to go back up to the surface to ask for Godzilla's help, and Godzilla's just charging at him, and Kong's like, no, wait, and they briefly fight each other again. I was like, yeah, rematch, buddy. Godzilla's probably gonna win again. Kong may be a king, but Godzilla is a god. But then Mothra intervenes, and it's essentially the monsters communicate with each other. And I actually like that aspect of the movie. The fact that the monsters could communicate with each other, and you could actually see scenes with the monsters communicating with each other for extended periods of time with no humans, and the ways that they can interact with each other and communicate with each other. Interesting. But Mothra's the one to intervene to be like, hey, Godzilla, you gotta help Kong because there's something going on in Hollow Earth. That was the stupidest thing I've ever seen. Like Godzilla was just like, "Sure, Captain," and immediately he and Kong are best friends. They're BFFs, and they just go into Hollow Earth. Like Kong is pointing when Godzilla's charging at him to the portal that leads to Hollow Earth, and Godzilla just doesn't give a shit. He just wants a rematch with Kong because they're very territorial in this movie. Anybody comes into Godzilla's territory in this movie, he's gonna destroy you, man. He is pissed off. He's like, don't come over here. He's a territorial monster who just wants to have a nice, relaxing day in the Roman Colosseum. It's his bed now, okay? Jesus, leave him alone. Let's talk about the fight in the Hollow Earth because Godzilla and Kong do team up to take on Shimo and Skar King. And it starts off as a really interesting fight, but then those crystal things, I forget what they call them. There's like a formal name for them. I call them calling them crystals. Looks like the Fortress of Solitude crystals. Those things collide, and that takes away the gravitational pull of Hollow Earth. So now the fight looks really, really fucking silly. Like, this is where it gets really silly and dumb because you just see these monsters flying through the air, trying to punch each other, trying to hit each other without any gravitational force. They're just floating and flying, and it looks really, really, it looked really funny. There is silly, dumb stuff that is fun like that in this movie. And it points to where we could possibly go in the future. I mean, that's interesting. But then that was honestly where most of the final battle takes place. Because then they get to Rio, they go back to the surface, they get to Rio, and I was disappointed with that part because I was like, all right, Rio de Janeiro is going to get destroyed. I'm like, another city that's going to get destroyed. I was going into this final act. I said, which city are they going to go to? Is it a city that I don't like? That's really my standpoint with these movies. I'm like, I want to watch cities get destroyed, but it's even more gratifying and satisfying when I watch cities get destroyed that I don't like. And they said, and they're in Rio. And I'm like, Rio's okay. It's a pretty cool city. And they don't really stay there for long. The fight is really, really, really short there. And of course, they take down the Skar King, but Shimo, of course, turns into a hero. I don't know if that really happened in the old Godzilla movies, but we gotta stop turning these monsters into the good people at the end of the movie because Rodan at the end of King of the Monsters bows to Godzilla. You have Mothra in that movie as an ally to Godzilla. You have Godzilla and Kong fighting and then teaming up in Godzilla versus Kong. You have them teaming up in this to take down Shimo and Skar King, and then the three of them take down Skar King. They lose that crystal. The whole thing is they lose that crystal that controls Shimo. So Skar King's trying to get it back. Godzilla and Kong are trying to prevent Skar King from getting it back. You have all of Hollow Earth with no gravitational pull to it. There's a lot going on. The silly ridiculousness of it, I would have just honestly, instead of taking the fight to Rio, just kept that fight in Hollow Earth. Just have a bunch of monsters still floating and flying through the air fighting each other. I think that would have been cool. I mean, it would have been cooler because it just felt like when we got to the surface on Rio, it just felt like a waste of time. I think that's really all I have to talk about with Godzilla Kong, the New Empire. Just wanted to get some things that I didn't like off my mind and some stupidity that was fun, but stupidity that was also just dumb off my mind as well. Still really enjoyed the movie now that I slept on it. I still think it's a fun movie. It knows exactly what it is. And I think that that's what these MonsterVerse movies are going to be moving forward, knowing what they are. So I've asked you if you've seen it, what your thoughts of it are. So I'm going to leave you with this. Rank the 5 MonsterVerse movies from best to worst in the comments section below. I'll leave my link to my website in the description below as well. You guys are the best. Thank you for watching. My name is Alex Madden, and I will see you at the movies somewhere.